Hello and welcome back to the Politics of Peterborough podcast. I'm your host, Dave Adcock. I'm back with a roundtable discussion looking ahead to the elections here in Peterborough. What's changed since the last election cycle, what issues are likely to dominate the campaign, and which wards and parties could be key to deciding who ends up running the council after May the 7th. As always with Peterborough politics, it's rarely dull, and with national politics shifting, council finances under strain, and big questions still hanging over regeneration, housing, public services, and the future direction of the city, this election could end up being one of the most significant for years, and that's before all the potential all-out elections that could come next year following local government reorganisation. To help try and make sense of it all, I'm joined by three people with inner knowledge of the workings of the council and of the city. My first guest is Councillor Julie Stevenson, Independent Councillor for Orton Waterville ward. A twice previous guest on the podcast, she's taken the decision not to defend her seat this time around and so will step down from the council after 8 years. Councillor Stevenson, welcome back once again to the podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
My second guest is making his Politics of Peterborough podcast debut. Elected to the council in 2024 for Peterborough First in Thorney Newborough ward, he left the group in June of 2025 and now sits as an independent. Outside of politics, he's the Chief Compliance Officer for Retirement Line, the UK's largest pension income broker, and in 2023 he was named the Rising Star of the Year at the Professional Pensions Awards. Councillor Mark Ormston, welcome to the Politics of Peterborough.
Thank you so much for having me.
My final guest was due to be Paul Stainton, but unfortunately he's had to pull out at the last minute. So instead we have a super sub who is a long-standing advocate for the city, who takes a close interest in how Peterborough develops and changes, in particular the preservation of heritage buildings and the character of the city centre. He was Peterborough's first ever Poet Laureate and is currently the Vice Chairman of the Peterborough Civic Society. Toby Wood, welcome to the Politics of Peterborough.
It's great to be here, thanks.
Now, Councillor Stevenson, if we can start with you. As I said in the introduction, you've taken the decision not to seek re-election this time around. What was it that led you to that decision?
Lots of reasons, mostly a personal reason. Being on the City Council for 8 years, I've actually been on the Parish Council for longer. That's 11 years now. And it's been very full on for a very long time. It's really a 24/7 job without much in the way of breaks. And meanwhile, life keeps on going in the background. So the main difficulty for me is just having enough time to deal with a personal situation. My mother has late stage Alzheimer's and there's an awful lot of work that comes with that. So something has to give. I'm exhausted at this point. Also, we're at a particular time in the council where it's likely that there are going to be all-out elections next year. That's everybody up for re-election because the council is changing. And I'm at the end of my second term. So it just feels like the right moment to step back. That doesn't mean I might not step forward again in the future. But for now, it feels like the right moment to step back.
You've publicly endorsed the Green Party candidate in your ward. This is the party that you previously led, but then left and said on this podcast that you'd been on the receiving end of bullying and safeguarding issues. What is it that's brought about this 360?
Yes, safeguarding was indeed the main issue there, but things have changed. I mean, time is a great healer, and it has healed an awful lot between myself at the Greens. At the time in 2022, I couldn't have stayed a day longer with the situation as it was. It took a while for people to realise really what I was getting at, what the reason was, that I had to leave the party, but that is understood now. And, you know, it's great just to be having a close working relationship with them again. And things have kind of gone full circle. It's just wonderful to leave the council at a time when things are so much better. And it was a Green seat. I was elected as a Green. I didn't want to go independent. I felt I had to. And I would like to see the Greens, hold on to what was their seat, the seat that we worked so hard against all the odds in 2018 to win when there'd never been a Green councillor in the city. So I'm fully supporting them.
And so what does the future hold for you after the 7th of May?
I'm not sure what's going to happen, actually. There's a few things that I'm considering doing. Some I can't just talk about just yet because I'm not allowed to do that. But I'm quite involved in, it sounds like a huge departure, but I'm very interested in communities, everything throughout my life, professional and personal, has been driven by community interests. So I'm now, I've just become the trustee of a charity for a particular pottery. It's called Shelley Pottery. And I'm about to leave after this podcast to go up for their annual weekend where all the Shelley collectors from around the world gather and talk about pottery. So it's slightly gentler than being the council chamber, maybe. But that's certainly one of the things that I'll be doing going forward. And then we'll see what opportunities present themselves.
Toby, first of all, thank you very much for joining us on such short notice. Can you talk us through what the Peterborough Civic Society is and what role it plays in the city?
Yes, certainly. I mean, the three things we really look at are Peterborough's past, present and its future. But we sort of have a balance that depends. We're not one of these groups that says that everything was wonderful years ago. And we're not one of these groups that's saying everything is going to be magnificent in the future. But we try to be realistic. But actually what we're trying to do as well is to improve Peterborough people's engagement with the city. We want people to look out of their front door tomorrow morning and say, I want to contribute a little bit more. I want Peterborough to be slightly better, whatever that better might be. So I suppose the Civic Society over the past few years has tried to raise the profile of the city, both for visitors and for residents. I think that's an important thing to remember, that it's the residents themselves that are sort of almost visitors to their own city centre. Of course, we look at things like planning issues. We look at the way that the city is being treated by national and local government. And often, to be honest with you, there's quite a few of the members that are getting their own back because they used to be in sort of positions of responsibility years ago and are now having their chance to have their say unfettered, so to speak.
I mean, how involved is it in the politics, with sort of, I guess, well, whether the day-to-day politics, but the politics of the city?
I mean, obviously, we're not involved in party politics whatsoever. But what we are involved with is trying to help and guide the councillors and, of course, the officers into making decisions which will be for the overall benefit of the city, whatever that might mean. It's all about getting balances right, isn't it? But yet at the same time, the Civic Society appreciates that the local authorities are in a really, very difficult financial state, for instance. Therefore, all the things that we would like to happen aren't necessarily going to happen.
Councillor Ormston, it's been quite a couple of years for the council itself and for you personally as a councillor. We'll get into those in more detail as we go along. But how have you found the role as a city councillor since your election?
Yeah, I mean, I love it. I love it. There's parts of it that are very tricky, of course there are, but I thoroughly enjoy it. I think there's going to be a part of me that goes, whenever that day comes where I'm no longer a city councillor, I don't know what I'm going to do with all that extra time. I don't know where I found the time to do it. So it's I thoroughly enjoy it, and if I can, I just want to take the moment just to congratulate Councillor Stevenson on her tenure. She's been a wonderful councillor. I'm sure she's going to miss it, and she may well come back in the future, I'm sure. But we are going to be losing some experienced councillors throughout this election for people standing down, and that's going to be a shame. The council's going to miss that.
She's going to be doing a lot of pottering with her pottery.
Well, I wasn't going to say about it, but I was born in Bournemouth, so I've got a lot of cool pottery rolling through my mind. I don't know if that's considered a competitor or not, but
Well, I'm hoping Toby's going to write a poem about this.
Oh, I'm halfway there, Julie.
I look forward to it.
Has the role been what you expected it to be when you sort of first signed up?
No, I can give you a direct politician's answer. No, it has not been. It's been a lot of learning. It's been a great learning experience from my point of view. But what an experience. How many people, there's only a finite number of people say, you get to stand up and say, vote for me. They have done, and now I get this wonderful experience. I feel very fortunate. It's an incredibly fortunate position to have.
So I wonder if we can just start by looking back before we look forwards. After the 2024 elections, we had 3 independents sitting on the council. We're now at 12 if we include Councillor Ray. And with every party seeing councillors leave the parties for various reasons. Is there something particular about Peterborough City Council that's resulted in this happening as opposed to elsewhere?
I do think that Peterborough's just quite fractured in regards to its makeup. So I think that gives more opportunity for people to move around. If there was just two parties dominating, you wouldn't see so much of it. So I think the environment enables that to take place. I also think that there's been a lot of personalities with Peterborough City Council way before my time, but people seem to bring personalities, and when they fall out with each other, they naturally no longer want to work together. So I think there is a degree of that, but maybe I'll be quiet and let Toby come in.
Well, it strikes me, Mark, that it's actually no bad thing for many councillors to be independent, because it could well be a sign that they are actually more focused on the needs of the constituents and the people that they're representing, as opposed to just falling into that sort of box of a particular political party. I mean, I might be wrong there. You'd have more experience than me, but that's my view.
No, I do not disagree with that at all. I think, we have to separate national politics from local politics, and we have to be realistic and probably communicate a lot better than we do. What is the role of a city councillor? What is within scope? What is outside of scope? What do each of the committees do? What's their scope and their remit? I don't think we're great at that. If you decided, Dave, to go out to the street with one of these wonderful microphones, say, what can the city council do? What can a city councillor push for? What can they lobby for? It'd be really interesting to hear the response.
I think the issue at the heart of this great increase in independence is one of lack of leadership, I'm afraid. It was like night and day for me. My first 4 years as a councillor were under the leadership of Gillian Beasley. It was a real champion for women, a real champion of me personally, really looked after me as the first Green councillor on the council, gave me opportunities to develop. Wonderful. And then when we had a change, when Gillian retired, everything changed. Absolutely everything changed. Councillors do need discipline. And there is no discipline, really, to speak of. And there's also a lack of discipline, really, within the parties. They're strange beasts, political parties. It's not like an employer. They do have, some of them have a whip for discipline, some of them don't. And I think a lot of what causes people to go independent could have been resolved through good leadership. My situation could have. I did not want to be an independent, and I see many negatives to it. I wish I was still within the fold of the party I joined with. I might not be standing down if I were, because I'd be better supported. So a lot of people say, you take the politics out of it, that's a good thing. It is in some ways, but I think that's separate to what's happened in Peterborough, which I do think has poor leadership at the heart of it.
Julie and Mark, is that something to do with Peterborough being a unitary authority? The fact that we're actually quite small compared to some of the larger authorities that are around? I mean, I often get the impression that Peterborough, in terms of offices, is often can be a staging post. It's somewhere where people can come to, get some professional experience and then move on to something larger. I've known quite a few officers do that. And it strikes me, this leadership thing is actually quite worrying from what I've been hearing. Do you think it's partly to do with us being a smaller unitary?
I don't know if it's about the size as much as, in my case, the timing, because Gillian Beasley had been here a long time before I came on board. But it is, having been here for 8 years, it really strikes me. I was looking back over some minutes of meetings I'd had a few years ago, and all the personnel have changed. So you lose that continuity. There are a handful of really good officers who have been with me since before I was elected here. But when you're constantly having a churn of officers, it's really hard to build those relationships, and partnerships are really important at the council, because that's how we get stuff done and get it done quickly without wasting resources, because we trust each other, and that trust takes time.
And another thing, of course, is the fact that both councillors and officers are sort of hamstrung by the fact that the finance side of things. I mean, as far as I'm led to believe, 70% of the budget goes on adult and children's social care, which is statutory. In other words, you have to do things by law, and it must be really quite frustrating for officers and members not to be able to have that sort of scope to expand. You're constantly looking to pare things down or to make sure that you're making correct financial decisions. Must be really tricky.
Well, that's a plan planning issue. We've known for a long time we're going to have this very, very large older population that we're going to be very expensive. We've known that for decades. I should add that I come from the voluntary sector, from charities, so I'm used to doing a lot with very, very little money. So yeah, it frustrates me to see what's happening with budgets. But part of the problem is the political system, where every year, apart from then a fallow year, as we call it, with no elections, it will change. We need, it would be much better, I think, if we just had elections of the whole city once every 4 years, so we had stability.
And I'm one of those older people, Julie, and I'm very, very expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I've been very much enjoying that conversation. I'll try and start at the beginning where Toby started, and I think it's a very good observation. For me, yes, anyone in politics and senior leadership within the council, you are likely to be ambitious. You have some sort of drive, and that drive isn't going to be, I'm going to get to this position and then I'm going to stay stagnant. It's just not going to happen. So I do think you are going to see a lot of churn if there's bigger unitary positions come available. So I do think that is a bit of a factor. I think Julie's absolutely spot on as well. Leadership matters. It matters from an organisation point of view. And to be honest, when your first question to me was, Mark, was it as you expected? The answer was no, because I'm from a corporate environment. I'm a chief compliance officer. I mean, it doesn't get much sexier, does it? Pensions compliance and local government. I mean, it's phenomenally hot stuff. But I mean, that's what it is for me. It was lacking a bit of governance within the systems itself. So that's what mainly surprised me. And I think it can matter. And like I say, I'm talking from from my experience. Mine was a Peterborough first experience, but it matters across every level as you peel that particular onion. I do think that the all outs and the opportunity of the all-outs is phenomenal. I mean, I am a massive geek about local government reorganisation, but I'm a massive geek for the opportunity it presents. And we don't even know what that's going to look like yet. But the opportunity remains, nevertheless. And it only grows or contracts ever so slightly depending on where it lands. And I think that's the thing that I would really like to press with this new lot of elections and the new cohort that come in. Don't go knocking on doors this week and say you're going to promise the earth, because actually LGR, I'll call it LGR moving forward, LGR is going to change all of that. But what you can do is say you're going to do this transition and give the best platform for Peterborough and its residents moving forward. How many times are we going to have the opportunity to make such a historic change and transition? It's a perfect time to be a city councillor.
It sounds, Mark, like you're really enthusiastic about local government reorganisation. What do you think it's going to bring to us that we haven't had up till now?
I think there's two. I'm going to be succinct. Two perfect opportunities. One, I think it will professionalise the city councillor role. I really hope it gives that opportunity. It's a hard job. Julie said 24/7. It can be. Every single day I am on my laptop. Every single day I'm on my phone. I will hear from residents. I will answer residents. No one goes more than 48 hours. And I was ashamed when I had 48 hours. Normally it's same day. I'll try to get back to everyone same day. And it can be all encompassing. It can really take over your full life. So you can professionalise that. It can really do that rather than making, because I think different residents get different experiences from different councillors, and I would love to make that more standardised. I think the other opportunity is a financial one. I am a financial person. I work in the financial sector. I do think there's a great opportunity to get economies of scale and benefit from the economies of scale, and that can only be a good thing for the residents as long as it's done properly.
I mean, obviously, as we've kind of said there, that there's been a lot of change in a fairly short period of time, whether that's from the back office or from councillors. As a result of that, has there been enough stability to actually be able to deliver any real transformation for the city, or is it just about party politics and big personalities within the council?
Well, you're asking us at a time where reform making significant gains around the country. We dodged a bullet, if you like, last year because in Peterborough we didn't have elections. So if we had, I'm sure we would have more than the one reform councillor that we have at the moment who came in via a by-election. So I think we're all quite anxious to see what's going to happen at these elections with regards to reform. Was the biggest concern about reform, putting politics aside, is lack of experience. I say that as someone who came in with no experience. I know how hard it is to come in, but being the only councillor that came through as a Green at the time, I was able to sit back and watch a little bit to see how it was all done. But if there's going to be quite a few and they're going to be involved actually at leadership level, they're going to need to get experience pretty quick. And we're seeing in other areas of the country, they're resigning, aren't they? Because it's not the job they thought it was going to be. And it's very, very difficult. So it's going to, unfortunately, because of the national picture, it's going to be anything but stable, I fear. And it may actually get a lot worse just through instability, which is a shame, because I think the current administration has been very good and has made a lot of positive change.
I think the honest answer is, unless you have a majority administration, decision-making stability is always going to be hard, and Peterborough's not had that for a considerable period of time. So I think that's the number one aspect. If you have a majority administration, it's much plainer sailing than what you're going to get when there's coalitions and minority administrations. I do think, though, as I said, and I'm going to keep repeating it, sorry to be particularly dull on this one, we're in a unique position with LGR coming through, and actually the opportunity is massive. It is massive. We can have that stability. Anyone that's going to come in and say, I'm going to solve, historic decisions, the opportunity simply is not going to be there. It now has to be a forward-looking picture. And yes, it's fragmented, and understandably so, but you've got one major job when you go into that chamber: governance. Deliver good governance. If that's what you walk into that room to do, and you go through your agenda, and have I delivered my governance? Is this a good decision? And have we followed the correct frameworks? You're not going to go too far wrong.
I think we're getting rather bogged down with jargon. I mean, I know that Reform have been looking at vanity projects, whatever that might mean, and cutting expenditure. And it's so easy to say these things without actually any great knowledge. I mean, for instance, we've got I know that people have been talking about the waste of money that the new pedestrian bridge, the Signet bridge over the river, the new pedestrian bridge. That's in fact Towns Fund money. That's money that's come from the government. It wasn't local authority money to start with. And I'm just really worried that we're going to become much more confrontational in the next few months, just for the sake of confrontation. And yet it's the citizens of Peterborough, the voters, the electorate, they're the ones that are going to be looking around and saying, I want my city to be slightly better. And I'm just a bit concerned that we're going to be very confrontational.
Yes, on that, Toby, I think as well we all need to change how we communicate. The council certainly does, because we now live in a world where a lot of our residents, they only read headlines. They read headlines on social media of newspaper articles, and they do not read the articles, and they don't read the depth.
Are you saying that communication's an important factor then?
Absolutely. Politics is not communicated
so
accurately
how
to
do we
people.
Do that?
There needs to be money for it, and that's something I've long said. The whole time I've been a councillor here, a huge part of my role, I feel, has been to educate my residents in what politics is, how it works, how they can be involved, what they should demand. And many of my residents have said to me, particularly as they've been saying a lot since I said I'm retiring, is that you taught me what politics is and what I should expect from the council and expect from my councillors. And people have got a right to know that. They are paying, these are council taxpayers who are paying for the council, and they have a right to know, but it needs a chunk of money because we're failing people here. And the result is Peterborough is a swing city. Look at how the MPs, it can be Labour, it can be Conservative. It doesn't know who it is. It doesn't have its identity, politically, which means the council is never settled. It's like being thrown around in a storm being a councillor at Peterborough. It's really hard to, deliver that good governance that we would all like to do, because you feel like you're going into battle every council meeting you go to. There needs to be a fundamental change, and maybe the new structures will deliver that. I certainly hope so.
I agree with you about the identity. I mean, I've often joked that Peterborough is north of the south, south of the north, west of the east and east of the west, but not really in the Midlands or East Anglia. I hope that's quite clear. Now, that might sound a bit cynical, but in fact, I think we do often not really know who we are. And you're quite right about, I mean, the two MPs we have at the moment, their total majority is under a couple of hundred, isn't it? So, I mean, you're absolutely right. I can see a Julie Stevenson communications consultancy coming up here, Julie.
Don't tempt me.
I just think it's a case of the communication. So we'll take Toby's example. So Toby's example there, you mentioned the bridge. So people say, waste of council money. Toby's absolutely right. Towns funds, not council money. But then those people say, no, I'm talking about officer time and officer expense. And all of a sudden we're then into the weeds. But the headline was, council waste money on bridge. Okay, we must communicate so much better, and we must get away from slogan politics, particularly at a local level. Everything's nuanced. The pie is only so big, so let's communicate it. People are educated; they're not daft. We can have a proper conversation. And to Toby's earlier point around, people might want to be a bit combative and stand out maybe and pick a side. I would urge people to be positive. You're going to stand out.
I think on the positive side, I think Peterborough has got lots of opportunities. I mean, I know, for instance, at the moment there's lots of discussion about what to do with Guildhall. How could that be repurposed and perhaps turned into a tourist information centre or whatever. Now, that's actually very doable. We're not talking about a huge building. We're not talking about millions and millions of pounds. Yes, we're talking about a significant amount, but lots that happens in Peterborough is actually achievable, as long as people have what I call the glint in the eye and that sort of vision and agreement to go forward and say, right, let's make this happen.
Turnout in the city for elections has been fairly stable but low in local elections at around 30% over the last 3 local elections. Even in the general election in 2024, both Peterborough constituencies only just scraped above 50%, which was significantly down on previous. Is this mainly down to apathy, or is it active distrust of politics and politicians in the city?
I think it's a mixture of the two, to be quite frank. I think we have gone through, at a national level, we've gone through a lot of political churn, much more than any of us would like over the last 5-6 years. So I think there's an awful lot of growing weary with it and growing weary with the options available as well. And it comes down again to that communication and trust. I think trust is the biggest factor for me. Can we trust those that we are electing to do what they said they're going to do? We have to restore trust in the political system from the ground up, and we are missing a bit of that. And until then, why would voters go out and vote? Because they don't feel that their vote and the trust they're putting in that individual, they will follow through. I mean, I felt very fortunate that in my election, turnout increased ever so slightly. So I managed to get people out that hadn't been voting previously, and I think that's because there wasn't an independent candidate for that ward for such a period of time, and they believed that they could put some trust in me. It's now down to me to follow that through and hopefully demonstrate that they didn't waste their vote.
I think that's a really good point. I've often thought that I want my politicians, I want to have a discussion with them, and I want to be able to say, well, I don't always agree with her, I don't always agree with him, but I know where they're coming from. And that's the thing, is actually to know where people are coming from, to know their rationale and their reasoning. I think another problem for politicians is the fact that there's this real mismatch between local and national. When you talk about mistrust of politicians, you're talking about Starmer, Farage, Badenoch, or all the rest of it. You're not actually talking to them about local. And I think the two need to be really differentiated, particularly when it comes to the next, the local elections. Let's try and forget about some of the national and international stuff that's going on. Let's try and actually focus much, much more on the local issues. And it's really difficult for people to understand sometimes those differentiations, those differences.
Going to say something slightly controversial, I suppose. I think part of the problem is postal votes. I'll tell you why I've always voted. I have never missed an election, and it's a point of principle for me. And the reason that I take that position is because throughout my childhood, my mother took me to the polling station with her. And that act of going to the polling station, placing your vote, it was certainly the mark of being an adult when I turned 18. And physically being there and going in that booth, you feel a part of something. It's quite emotional, it's quite visceral. And while there's lots of reasons why postal votes are really valuable, particularly for older and disabled people who are so important they're not disenfranchised, I think it's had this other effect where it feels a bit more casual. You know, there's arguments about perhaps it should be compulsory to vote, and that's certainly the case in some countries, and how that would change things here. But I think, unfortunately, at the moment, we've kind of got ourselves in a situation where people just are forgetting to vote, or it's not seen as being that important to them, or there's a disconnect in their minds between their experience of their locality and voting. And underpinning all of that is a chronic lack of political literacy in this city, and I'm sure all around the country, where people just don't understand those things that they care about. They can actually influence. They can by voting. It really matters who you return to a council or as your MP. And I think we've lost that. There's this word slacktivism. It's like activism, it's where you press a button or sign a petition. You feel like you did something, where in fact you did nothing. You did exactly nothing there. You might as well not have done it. And we need the government, again, money to devote towards increasing people's political literacy. And then I think when people care, the turnout will improve.
I think on the postal voting, this election here in particular, the one coming up, it really concerns me, actually. And I really hope that my concerns are completely dismissed and proved wrong. But we had the 3-year rule come in for the postal voting, so people have to re-register. People re-registering for their postal vote is way down. Now, are they going to turn out at the polls? I'm a little bit dubious of that point, and I'm concerned that actually we already have a low turnout. Are we going to now get down from under the 30% and we're going to start seeing 25% turnout as the bit of the norm for people to come and vote for us as councillors to go and stand and make the case for them in the chamber? It matters. People should have their say.
Looking back, it's quite interesting and struck what Julie was saying about her mum taking her. I remember my father and mother treated politics like it was part of a lifeblood. It was part of what you did. It was part of how you were going to develop as an individual or a family. And now it's almost like a minority sport, and in often cases a blood sport. Sort of a minority sport. It's almost treated as some sort of bolt-on extra, and people naturally seem to say, I don't trust any of them, without even thinking about it. And a lot of that has been to do with the sort of sensationalism on the television, the radio, or social media, or whatever. I'm not an expert, but I think social media's got a lot to answer for in terms of diverting people away from what are the important issues, and almost creating trivial things and making them important. And I'm not sure that's going to improve over the next few years.
I mean, I'm going to pitch an idea to you here, Dave, because I've been thinking about this for some time. Those people who do just vote for one party, so they just go tribal and they go just looking at a particular party. Think of it as a sport. So when you do, I'll go to use football. If you've done a fancy football team for Peterborough City Council, it's highly unlikely to be made up of one political party. And I would love for whoever leads the administration next year into LGR, look at it like a fancy football team. Who's your best striker? Who's your best midfielder? Who's your enforcer? Who's your this? Who's your that? And that's how local politics should work for me. It should be your fancy football team.
Now there's a thought. That's a posh legend Ken Charlery, our magical striker from 1992 to stand for council. Tell you what, you get 100% turnout for him, I tell you.
There you go, see.
Picking up on what Toby said about social media, I think most people don't realise that social media is owned media. It is partial, and it's driven by advertising. The social media platforms that exist now. I mean, I created my own social media platform back in 1995, where the web was a completely different place. I ran that for 20 years. I couldn't run it now. Not the way that things are. Safety and security are just not a consideration, it seems to me. And any political party or anybody with lots of money can basically buy the opportunity to put some very dangerous content in front of people. And by dangerous, I also mean dangerous because it's confusing. And I mean, you can see this particularly the far right. The far right has been able to create a lot of content and dress it up so that it's appealing to a lot of people who then share it and don't realise that what they're sharing might have some undertones in it that are pointing in a particular direction. With all of this, the rest of us who think we know better need to wake up and lobby for this situation to be improved and do something about it. Perhaps take a leaf out of Trump's book, and only this leaf, and create our own platform that's safe and that's clear to people about politics so that they understand. I'm very sorry to see the way that social media has gone and is being used just to manipulate people. But if we're not happy, then we will need to work hard together to address that.
Yeah, I mean, this is, again, one of the major things for me. It was really eye-opening. Like I say, I'm a chief compliance officer from an FCA-regulated company in financial services. If something goes out that is incorrect, I need to take it down immediately. I need to rectify it. I need to evidence any of the claims in it. I personally could be fined as the person with those functions for the company. So when you go on social media, you see all these incorrect claims and AI manipulating things to look very different as they are. It blows my mind to go, how is this allowed? Like, it shouldn't be allowed at all. So it really does sort of worry me and scare me. But on the flip side of that, the power of social media, I would not be sitting here today having this conversation, enjoying myself as I am, without my social media presence that I had during my campaign. I had people say, I voted for you because you were the only candidate I saw on Facebook. You're the only candidate that came up on my Instagram. So it turns into votes, but it's dangerous.
I think the whole thing, I'd follow on from that by saying, what is truth? It's very, very difficult now to sort of negotiate and navigate yourself through what is truth. I mean, I'm led to believe that TikTok, for instance, is owned by a large Chinese company with links to the Chinese government. Well, you know, if the general public knew that, then they perhaps might be more wary about TikTok. You know, the AI things are coming through now. You know, what is truth? I wrote an article for the Peterborough Telegraph about 6 months ago, and half of it I used on AI. I said I did. I just wanted to let people know that you can write 200 words about the history of Peterborough and get it off the internet or whatever, and it suddenly becomes truth. And I think that's the really worrying thing. I'm really concerned about young people. And by young people, I'm talking about secondary-age children now, growing up in an era where it's going to be very hard for them to know what is real and what is not real. And that's going to be a real problem. Mental health difficulties, here we come.
So my background is in campaigning, and particularly I worked for one of the very large charities for a long time. And when you want to change something, in order to change people's minds, change their behaviour, you need to go where they are. And this is the problem that we have. It's interesting hearing about, you know, social media being so important in your campaign. It wasn't in mine 8 years ago. It wasn't. It was being seen physically out there. But things are changing. And the trouble we have is we need to go where people are. Where are they? They're on these owned platforms where there's a load of garbage. And so we as councillors are trying to be heard. And then we're accused of, you know, shouting too loudly, taking over. You know, it's actually really, really hard now, because you knock on doors, people don't want to open their doors to you. They often don't. They've got one of these doorbells with a camera and they see, oh, you know, hide your clipboard. Oh, they're not going to answer the door. Engagement, in a world where we've never had as much possibility for communication than ever before, it's really hard to communicate. And part of it is lack of regulation, and part of it is people's changing behaviour. But I feel that as the community, if you like, as politicians, we're way behind and we need to change. Otherwise, how on earth are we going to engage with the public? And then that turnout will still continue to drop.
Bruce Springsteen, 57 channels and nothing on.
The key word there that I listened to was engagement. Engagement is now currency. On social media, engagement turns into money. We have commercialised engagement. We're in the political sphere, and that just feels icky. I'm sure there's much more eloquent ways of putting it, but it just feels icky.
At this election, we've got 92 candidates standing across the 18 wards. Just 18 of those are women, less than 1 in 5. In 2024, 38% of candidates were women. In several wards this time around, we haven't got a single female candidate. What's the reasoning behind this, do we think?
Appalling behaviour on the part of some of the existing councillors. Why would any sensible woman want to join that? And I can tell you, it's hugely disappointing to me. As a female councillor who came through sort of on my own, most councillors are lovely, but there are a few that are far from that. And during my time as a councillor, I've been most dismayed that a number of female councillors have spoken to me privately and said they are too scared to speak in the council chamber. That's appalling. They've faced their residents. They've gone through years of campaigning to get elected. They've worked so hard. Intelligent women with a lot to say, and many ways that that their ideas could improve the city. And they are too scared to speak in the council chamber because of the frankly bullying language that is used by some of my colleagues there. So there's your answer, I'm afraid.
That is really, really worrying, Julie. It's almost like you're describing a society of 50 or 100 years ago. It's almost like, we're here in Peterborough now. We've got a dinosaur exhibition on, a big dinosaur in Peterborough Cathedral. It's almost like you're talking about big dinosaurs of another sort in the council chamber, metaphorically speaking. What you just said there is really worrying and shaming.
I'm 55, and I've lived, and I'm pretty tough. Anyone will tell you I've been reduced to tears in that council chamber. I had to leave one meeting because of being reduced to tears by 2 other councillors. I've had other councillors come up to me, and it tends to be in the breaks, and say things like, "No one likes you. You don't have any friends here." Just to be bullying. It was not based on anything. And I'm tough. I can look after myself, but I shouldn't have to. I'm there to do governance, and women give up a lot to take on a role like this because there's often childcare or caring for elderly people. I shouldn't have to stop doing this because I've got other caring responsibilities. But the fact is, we're stretched in many, many different ways, and we should be better supported. So to have to also deal with nonsense that gets in the way. There's always banter in politics, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about behaviour that's perceived as sexism and a bullying, I'm afraid. And leadership needs to address that.
Listen, for me, anyone that sits here and says that misogyny and sexism isn't happening in our country in day-to-day life is unfortunately blind. They need to give themselves a bit of a head wobble. And that's happening across councils up and down the country. And I think for me, personally, we cannot be representative of the residents unless we have more women councillors. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I know all the answers, but we should be going to female that are interested and hearing what would make them feel more safe and secure and want to do the role. Because there's no point I don't have the answers. I would love to listen to the answers and do everything I can to put them into practice, but I don't have the answers. But we need more female voices in the chamber.
When I was a head teacher many years ago, if members of staff came to me and said what Julie has just said, it would be obviously a leadership issue here. We're actually talking about the leadership of the council. I use that in the broadest sense, either ignoring or not knowing about or sweeping something under the carpet. If these things are happening, and I know they're happening just because I've heard it and I've spoken to people in Peterborough City Council, if these things are happening, then it's a leadership problem as well. It's not just a sort of, we haven't got enough women, it's a leadership problem about creating the climate for success.
Obviously, one potential outcome of a lack of female candidates, as you say, is a lack of women on the council. What's the potential result of that happening if we see a reduction in the number of women on the council?
Unfortunately, because of lack of leadership, where we do have female councillors on the council, they're often not supported in the right way because it's such a stressful environment. When there is bullying, people react in different ways. And not everyone shrinks and says, I'm never going to speak in this chamber. Other people, you take on board the stress in different ways. And I think several things have happened within the council that have led to at least 3 female councillors going independent that might have been avoided if there'd been, as Toby says, better leadership. But I think we all have to be each other's leaders. There are 60 of us on the council, majority men. It would be great to have more of our male councillors stand up to those who are making it very, very difficult for women to succeed. We've had a few times it's nearly happened, but people are scared of each other. They're scared politically. They're scared of how it looks. They're scared to put their head above the parapet. Someone will come through eventually who's tougher than me. She shouldn't have to be. Who's got the energy to provide that leadership and keep pushing. You hear about these really strong women. I take a lot of strength from like the suffragette movement and think what those women went through. We shouldn't have to go through that. Those women went through that, so we wouldn't have to. But until someone comes along who's really, really tough and can bang some heads together, I can't see that cultural change coming anytime soon, I'm afraid.
This is so depressing, and I hope that the women listening to this podcast are not going to be too put off, because if I was at the moment, I would be. So come on, let's try and be a bit more positive, folks.
I think that's why I've been quite quiet on the conversation, because this is where for me it's just not acceptable. It shouldn't be happening. I can't, part of me's here and I'm between getting a bit angry and just bursting into tears, because I don't fully understand how we'd be sitting here in 2026 and having this conversation. It's baffling to me. Julie's experience that she's outlined there should have been nipped in the bud immediately. Again, I've come from this corporate environment, maybe too much so that I come across as robotic potentially and overly geeky. But if this happened, I would have come straight in and I would have said, Julie, we're investigating it and we're going to sort it. It's not right that you feel this way. And I just don't understand why these things aren't taking place. It's really concerning.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cultural thing for sure. It is to do with leadership for sure. But on the point of, I'm sorry to say this, Toby, on the point of let's be more positive, it's women being positive that's led us to this. We should be angry. We should be angry and calling for better treatment by our male counterparts. Because unfortunately, when a woman is angry, she's emotional. She's, she's crying, or she can't handle it. If it's too hot, get out of the kitchen. Why? You wouldn't say that to a man, but then that's the atmosphere that happens. So what I would love to see, and there are some, and I could name them, I won't. There are some really strong advocates for women, male advocates for women at the council as well. But they're drowned out somewhat by certain characters who think it's okay to behave the way that they do. And I fear actually for, again, without mentioning names, certain young male councillors who are being called out by female councillors at the moment for things they've said and done that have made women councillors feel vulnerable and at risk. And the council, not the council's fault, because it's the government, it's the local government association that needs to all work together to put in sanctions in place. So when a woman feels threatened, you might be coming on to this, Dave, but I keep reading residents saying all councillors should publish their addresses. I took all our addresses down when I was in the Green Party, our home addresses, because of safety concerns. That's the reality that we have here. Sort all these things out. Women will come. We want to be politicians. We have a point of view, but we've got to face the reality. It's really unpleasant at the moment.
Maybe I don't want to bring this part to a close. It's really important we discuss it, but I feel particularly passionate about being the only person that will be a councillor after these discussions and after May. Any female or male or any individual thinking about wanting to be a councillor, being particularly a woman that are concerned about this, please reach out to me. We will have a conversation. If you're a female councillor sitting in Peterborough City Council now and you feel this way, please reach out to me and have a conversation. You are not alone. You do not need to go through this alone. I will be there to listen, so please do reach out.
It's interesting, Julie. I was literally about to go on to the point. So candidates often talk about being local or living in the ward. In 2026, does that still cut through with voters?
I have a bee in my bonnet about this. Every election that comes up, political parties, candidates start having a go at people who don't live in the ward. Let me tell you, there are a lot of advantages to not living in the ward. For those of us who have served during the pandemic, who were in the ward the whole time when it was very, very difficult for our residents and couldn't get away. Would you, in your job, would you eat, sleep, spend your entire weekends in your office? You need to get away from it. And our wards are our workplace. In the ward I represent, Orton Waterville, I do live there. Councillor Day does not live there. Councillor Day is a terrific councillor, and she comes to our ward and she does excellent work, and then she goes back to where she lives, which is another part of the city. And that's fantastic. Using where you live as a stick to beat potential councillors with, when it's not the rule that you have to live in your ward, is somewhat pathetic. In my view. It's a lot on your mental health being a councillor. It really is. And I have to go a long way not to be recognised. I can't anywhere in this county. Forget it. I can't. I go to theatre, quite far away. I'm recognised in the foyer all the time. People come up all the time. I can't go on public transport without being recognised, and it's okay, but it's a lot after a lot of years. So I think personally, my mental health would benefit if I didn't live in the ward, and therefore my performance, I think, would benefit. I say to people, when I put the bin out, it's a political act, because everyone sees me putting my bin out and they want to come and talk to me, and that's fine. But it's a lot. It's a lot on councillors' shoulders. So as long as you live within the city, I think work within the city, that's enough. And I wish people would just drop it and stop using that as a stick to beat people with.
It's not particularly logical, is it, really? I mean, if you think about the good schools are populated by good teachers and good leaders. They don't necessarily live in the catchment area of the school, but what they do is have a look at the young people, the children that they're teaching, and say what is best for them. This is how I can achieve success for those people. So I'm with Julie on this one.
Okay, so I agree with the points being made. I don't think you have to live in the ward to be a good councillor. I don't think that's the message at all. However, to try and give some sort of balance, or maybe look at it from a different point of view, I think if you do live in the ward, you can resonate with some of the day-to-day what I consider day-to-day council activities. And I can't believe I'm going to say day-to-day because it's a bit of a national shame, but fly tipping, the speeding down the villages, any antisocial behaviour you get when you're having that conversation with the resident, you feel yourself feeling the same level of passion, because you go, do you know what, I experience it. I experience exactly what you're experiencing, because I walk past it just like you just walked past it. And I don't think you can have quite the same level if you don't experience it on your doorstep exactly the same way. But that doesn't mean you can't be a very good councillor and not live in your ward.
But a local councillor is going to be spending a lot of time in the ward anyway, aren't they? Whether
Absolutely.
They live there or not. So they should be picking those issues up anyway.
100%, 100%. I'm just saying that the wards, they are very different. I'm of course I'm going to point at my own ward and say it's one of the more different ones. To say Dogsthorpe is going to be very different to Thorney and Newborough and the issues and everything that we face. So I just think that there is an element of being able to say, I've reported that fly tip already because I walked past it with my dog this morning, and that hits with the resident with a little bit more reassurance than, I'm going to be there this afternoon because I'm a city councillor for that area. I'll have a look at it myself. Do you see what I mean? Very similar outcomes, but it's just a little bit different in the messaging.
I mean, one of the interesting things I thought was that somebody left a comment on one of the Facebook posts I put up fairly recently where they'd asked if any of the candidates were living in the ward. And so I asked them a question, does that actually make a difference? And they said it can do. But the point they made was whether it's different because it's a rural ward, whether that has a difference to being a rural ward compared to an urban ward. What do we think about that?
I mean, for me, I do think that, but that's because I have got bias being in a rural ward. I would be a little bit more at sea and probably have to adapt a little bit if I was in Central Ward, for example, or Dogsthorpe, versus being in Thorney Newborough, I can tell you now, when I was campaigning, I spent 4 hours in the car to deliver 20 postal letters. You know, you're not going to get that in Dogsthorpe. You know, you're travelling a lot of miles. It's rural, it's farming. It is fly tipping is a massive issue for us, but it is very different from a more central ward. I just think they are. They're not good or bad things. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying they are different.
I think it might depend as well on your communication style. I mean, my residents I belong to my residents very much, and partly because I broke through as the first Green elected. But my residents are my eyes and ears everywhere. I know what's going on all the time because my residents are constantly messaging me and telling me. And my key skills as their councillor are, one, communication, so it's always open in whatever channels they want to use. And the second one is empathy. I don't need to see what they're seeing to feel what they're feeling, and that might be a personality thing as well. I enjoy people, and I have probably a highly emotional relationship with some of my residents. So I guess it depends on the sort of ward it is, also the sort of council and sort of person that you are, and finding that magic blend that means that you're effective.
But they're messaging you, Julie, because they know they can and because they know they're going to get listened to. It's that thing about empathy. I bet there's lots and lots of local councillors in this city who don't receive messages because they know they're not going to be listened to. I've got no evidence for that, but I bet it's true.
It's that old thing of want something done, ask the busiest person. And people when they contact me, will often start by apologising. I'm sorry to contact you about this. Like that's what I'm here for. Contact me. It's absolutely fine. And they feel like they can. They feel that, oh, Julie, I mean, I have to push back a lot of people who are not in my ward. Oh, Julie, my councillor won't help me, so I'm asking you, and I say, I'm sorry, you have to speak to your own councillor. So that's a personal development thing as well for us all as councillors, that, you have to be a people person. You can't just do this on policy alone. You have to be someone who people want to talk to, or you will not be good at this.
No, that was exactly the example I was going to use. This weekend I had several messages from people not in my ward saying, I've not heard from my councillor, please can you support? I've heard that you'll support. And that's quite tricky to go, I really want to support. But what you sort of end up doing is generally giving the relevant councillor a nudge, and sometimes it's the case that they've misspelt their name wrong when the email or something like that. These are often can be just very human and innocent mistakes, can't they? But yeah, absolutely, part of the role is just being approachable. No matter where you live, you have to be approachable, you have to communicate, be visible, and the number one thing I always say is be accountable. You are accountable as a councillor, and you've discussed this many times on the podcast, but I do think that councillors have their strengths and weaknesses, and it's okay to have your strengths and weaknesses. Just be aware of them. Everyone has their blind spots to a certain degree, but if you know there's a known weakness, don't shy away from that. Just say, that's not my area of strength. I'm strong here. I will go and find someone that's strong for you here and can help you here. We are a collective unit to support one another. You're not going to go to too many councillors. There are a few. You're not going to go to too many councillors to go, can you help me or point me in the right direction here? And they're going to go, sod off. That is rare in my experience anyway.
I asked each of the participants in the Politics of Peterborough LE26 mini-series whether this election would be about local issues or national and international ones. And everyone pretty much said it should be about local issues. But is it possible that this is going to be the case when the Greens in 2024 were very much campaigning on the back of the war in Gaza, and at these elections, Reform are calling for these elections a chance to get rid of Sir Keir Starmer as Prime Minister.
So for me, I think there's always going to be people who will use their local elections to either be tribal because they support their party and that's how it is, and also to send a message to national government. And that's an effective way of sending a message to national government. But I think we always have to be quite realistic now that is a bit of a tired message. Do I think that Labour nationally are going to struggle up and down the country in these local elections? Absolutely, I think they do. They will. Do I think Labour's going to lose every seat here? No, I don't think they will. I think there'll be some local angles here that will maintain some Labour positions. Will Keir Starmer resign after local elections? Absolutely not. Keir Starmer will only leave if there's movements within the political party to make him go. Every national government, after being elected, go into local elections knowing they're about to get a kicking if the country isn't happy and facing challenges. So I would urge people to, again, look within context, look at where we are. LGR's coming down the road. We're not going to be able to make massive decisions this next council year. We've probably got if LGR stays on track, we've probably got about 4 meetings to do something from full council point of view. Then the ability to make any financial decisions is removed from Peterborough City Council. So again, any candidates coming to your door promising the earth, give them a little nudge and just remind them that LGR is actually going to stop that. And it's about transition. We now need sensible politics. And who do you want for Peterborough, living in Peterborough, to do that for you, not the national parties?
I do a lot of talks around Peterborough, particularly about the Civic Society, about blue plaques. And it's really interesting talking to people during those meetings and afterwards, which leads me to this this question: what are the local issues? If I say this with a bit of a smile on my face, but if I ask what the local issues are at these various meetings that I go to, people talk about litter, they talk about potholes, and they say we don't go to Queensgate anymore since John Lewis is shut. I mean, the number of times I hear the word John Lewis, I would be a millionaire if I heard it every time. And there's a lot of point to that. But of course, the world is changing. The city centre is changing. Shops are changing. I don't come to the city centre anymore for shopping. I come to the city centre to look at our wonderful buildings. I come for a drink. I come for a meal. I come to meet people. I come for a show or whatever. And so I just pull that back to what are the local issues? What is it that we're expecting people to make decisions about, voters I'm talking about? And I think that's very unclear.
Part of what we were talking about is that because there are no local manifestos anymore. It used to be a thing, but the local parties don't seem to put one together anymore.
Well, the reason some of the parties don't bother, no one reads them. No, we're in a world now where, TLDR, too long, didn't read, but people only want to read really short sound bites because that's the way the internet has pushed people. People have very low attention span. So you'll get some people that read the manifesto, but many, many won't. So we need to deliver what we're going to be doing to people in a way they can digest really quickly, absorb and understand really quickly in order to make decision. There's a phrase that I enjoy, a confused mind says no. It's very important in communication. A confused mind says no. So if you want people to do what you want, to make sure they can understand what you're asking them to do. Otherwise, they won't do it. So we need to rethink a lot of things. And this manifesto, this great long wordy document, it doesn't fit our current times. There needs to be a complete rethink, and probably starting with young people. I mean, one of the challenges at the moment is life is changing really, really, really quickly. There's such huge generation gaps now between generations quite close together, and we need more youth services. And while we're sorting those out, ask the young people, what's the best way to communicate with you that makes you feel like you can make a difference in your world?
I mean, the civic societies are parallel to this, really. I mean, we used to communicate with our members via newsletters. We used to print the newsletters off, and it cost a bit, and we stick them in the post and all the rest of it. And now it costs a fortune. And even though the majority of our members are older, we now communicate mainly via email, mainly on social media, and via our website. And that's that's now different. So the sort of the printed stuff, sadly, because I love a bit of printed stuff, it just doesn't have the effect that it used to.
Can I just add to that? So, speaking as a sort of politician, we have the opposite problem with that. So when we put anything out electronically, people don't read it, go straight in the bin. Still, the most effective way to campaign for local council is leaflets through the doors, and we believe it takes 8 until the resident starts noticing them.
Okay, Julie,
so it's
I'm wrong. I admit it.
Well, no, it's different groups, though. That's how it is now. If you ask me in 5 years, it might change. I would love for it all to go electronic. Having been a Green, with all this paper, I would love it to go electronic. But the reality is people get way too much electronically and don't know how to manage it. They sign up to too many lists and things and then can't manage all the stuff that's coming in. So they see something called politics, deletes. And then again, it's narrowing the channels that we have to reach people. We need a massive rethink of all of this. We'll end up with as I said earlier, loads of communication channels and nobody communicating with each other.
I think to answer the initial question about the manifesto, so that I think it comes back to, I mentioned it earlier, trust. Would you trust a manifesto, national, locally? What would you go through that manifesto and go, yep, they're going to do that? I think particularly recently, we've seen too many times they've gone, actually, the context has changed, the world has changed, we can't now follow through on our manifesto. That may or may not be within their control, but the reality is, unfortunately, trust has been broken with manifestos. So I think the public aren't really engaging with manifestos in like they used to, certainly say 10 years ago. On both Julie and Toby's point, shock, the guy who loves the data is also a bit of a strategist. It's much more targeted now. I think you get the data, you target certain cohorts depending on how they voted before, how they've engaged before. Social media, you know exactly what cohort of people are engaging with you, how oftentimes they're visiting. You get the data, then you start targeting that cohort and that data. Same with postal votes in particular. You get the postal vote data, you would hammer that postal vote through the door because they're engaging with their post through the door. You have to be a lot more sort of tactical, I think, these days. Or you saturate. That's why I had to do. I was an unknown in my ward. I had to saturate. I would run every single door 3 times. I paid for Facebook advertising. I paid to basically be everywhere I possibly could.
Yeah, the difficulty with that sort of, I suppose, traditional approach for political parties is that it's the disenfranchising of people who are not that politically engaged, because you've only got finite resources, finite amount of time is part of that, and people and money for leaflets. You tend to target people who already vote. And the people that don't vote, you don't door knock, and you're always wanting to engage most of the people who are uncertains, and it creates a situation where a huge amount of people just never, they'll say, "I've never had anybody knock on my door," and I think, well, that's because you've been put in a basket with people who are not worth bothering with, and that again is a big failing of our current way of doing things.
I remember Charles Swift many, many years ago saying on regular occasions the reason that he used to get re-elected is because he used to go around to certain old folks' homes in North Ward, as it then was. He used to have a chat to them. All used to vote for him, used to think he was absolutely wonderful, which of course he was. And he said he didn't need to actually canvass every single person at all, just a certain group, and he calculated how many votes he'd need, and he'd get in every time. Nothing new.
And that's it for part 1. Thanks so much for listening. Part 2 of the roundtable will be released in your feeds very soon, so make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, on YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can find me on X and Facebook at PoliticsPBORO. Please let me know what you thought of the episode. If you have any suggestions as to who you'd like to hear on the show, or any questions you'd like me to put to my guests, you can email politics.peterborough@hotmail.com. This episode of The Politics of Peterborough was created, hosted, recorded and edited by me. I'll see you next time for part 2.